Welcome to episode 1 of Leading Out Loud. In this engaging interview, Amanda Dunaway shares her insights on authentic leadership, managing through change, and the importance of leading with integrity and empathy. Discover practical tips for navigating leadership challenges and fostering a positive team culture.
Hello, how are you?
What are you wearing on your head?
I know. Well, you would know because technically I think you got this for me.
I did. I did.
So I had to do it in your honor. I looked in my closet. I had nothing pink, no shock. So amongst all of the black clothing, I chose a nice black t-shirt, but I thought I had to pair it with this. And I will say she's giving the volume she doesn't normally have.
Yeah, it's
Um,
giving like Snooki Bump, but
a
this
little.
generation.
Yeah, I mean, it's comfy. Like, I wish I could get this, maybe not always with the mask.
But all the time.
Yeah,
You need it
exactly.
all the time. I feel that. I
So,
feel that.
what I will say, to kind of kick things off, first and foremost,
Yeah,
thank you for offering
of
your time
course.
to record with me. I was trying to think back. You and I have known each other now for a number of years. And I would
Yeah.
say, for me, along kind of my journey of just leadership and being an employee and all the things in between, you meet people in your life that stand out to you as unique or special for one reason or another. And you are one of those people for me, despite, to a lot of people's surprise that we were friends, like right off the bat.
I know.
It was very much an energy thing. I think you are just such a positive human being, despite even some of the personal things that you've had to overcome. Really just an overall sweetheart of a human. And
Oh.
so the unicorn energy that you give, and obviously recognizing your background too, it tracks. Like if a unicorn were a person, it is Amanda Dunaway, I think.
Baby, there she.
I mean, you own it. So that
Yeah,
that is you. You are it. Just thinking about it too, how perfect to kick off the year of the fire horse. I mean,
I know. I mean, I feel like a fire horse is cousins to a unicorn, right?
yeah, it's been a minute since we actually
Yeah.
connected. If you don't mind, just catch me up on where you're focusing your energy and time these days.
Yeah. So my son just had his 16th birthday. So that's a big a milestone. It's crazy. I can't believe he's already 16. And, in the same week, I found out he's going to leave me a year early 'cause he's going to graduate early. So I'm processing all of that. I know, but I'm proud of him. He is my greatest, I guess, accomplishment, which I know with your own son. It's like that mom son thing is real. And when they get to the age where you get to engage with them like a human, it's a whole different ball game when you're not disciplining them all the time. So, yes, we just did that. I mean, I know you're gonna be shocked, but I still spend a lot of time in the sand playing
Yeah.
volleyball with my other group of people, so I love that, and then I recently got a roommate, so I'm loving that too. It's like back to college days.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like, get ready together, we have girl time, so that's really fun, but from a professional standpoint, I just, in my current role, got a brand new set of hospitals, which I think is always exciting. It's like you get to start over. You get to look at what you did well in your leadership the year before and recreate that, but then also like what didn't you do well? And so I get to use this as an opportunity to change some things, refocus. And so that's been a lot. I mean, anytime I think Q1 in work or otherwise, there's a lot going on there, so that's what I've been doing, getting to know them, trying to do that while doing all of the parenting and other stuff that is going on, navigating blizzards,
Yeah.
navigating a foot of snow. So, yeah, just getting to know the new hospitals, visiting, and seeing what's next in terms of that for me for the next year.
Yeah. Now, without going too deep in the detail,
Yeah.
I do want to highlight what I would call your special skill, which I think in part is also why we've called you a unicorn, because it is a function that for most operators, not everyone can do. And unfortunately, though, a lot of people are faced with practices that need dramatic help, if you will. They're not well functioning or, something isn't working. So, just high level, can you describe a little bit your special skill, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that's most obvious based on the picture, the pink, is I'm an extroverted extrovert. I thrive on people, connection, relationships. I think it's how you and I connected. To your point, we are somewhat of an unlikely pairing. I'm the pink to your black, I'm the Barbie to your black cat. Like, it is very much an unusual experience. I'm an extroverted extrovert. It is my superpower, is, I guess, like I like to say it, because not only can I talk to anybody or am I willing to talk to anybody, I feel like I create a very safe space for people when I do that.
Mhm.
My friend group is very eclectic, somewhat of the misfits, or maybe the non-mainstream, I guess would be the best way to call it. Not that they're not amazing people by far, but I think I just provide a space for people who maybe haven't always found like they fit in to do that. And so I've been able to turn that into my professional life, into building relationships with leaders or even workers in hospitals that maybe aren't the golden children of the company, or they're not functioning at a high level, right? Like, we acknowledge what your opportunities are. I'm very much share like how I'm going to partner with them. I make myself overly accessible. Not every conversation is about work or has to be heavy or anything along those lines. It's
Yeah.
just a day to day. How are things going? And understanding and knowing who they are outside of work also goes a long way, which I think is the other thing that I'm really good at. I do genuinely care about everybody in my life. Like,
Yeah.
that's not inauthentic. That really is who I am. And so I just utilize that in the professional world as well, and it pays off.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons, I chose you for this topic, right? Of
Yeah.
what I'm calling leading without a mask. And we'll dig into more about authentic leadership in a minute. But I think it's a term that's thrown around. People have heard of it. People may say they're an authentic leader, and they aren't necessarily. And I think
Mhm.
there are certain attributes to that style of leadership. And I will preface that with I don't think there's one specific style that's necessarily better than others. If I've learned anything along my own leadership journey, it's that you have to be a bit of a chameleon if you
Yeah.
are managing people because not every person responds to that style. And so if you pigeonhole yourself into, I'm only an authentic leader, like, sure, that can guide who you are along your journey, but you also have to be willing to sometimes be a harder leader that draws a boundary or pivot. And maybe you have to become more inspirational given a
Yeah.
certain circumstance that you're trying to navigate with that local team. So I do, of course, I think that's obviously why we've connected too. I agree that you have to focus on your people if you're ever going to be successful as a leader. And people know authenticity versus inauthenticity.
They do. I think it's huge. To your point, like, if I was really leading in my most authentic self, I probably couldn't necessarily sustain in certain scenarios, right? Like, authentically, I think you should be able to talk about anything you want to talk about. I think people should be able to, wear whatever they want to wear, be who they are. But I also understand that when you are representing an organization, a company, an enterprise, anything along those lines, there are just certain boundaries you have to work within. And I think that's the other piece to that, is it's learning how to lead authentically and maintain who you are while still being able to move forward the goals, or the culture, what you're trying to build within those parameters, right? Because, like, otherwise the world would just wear sweatpants every day and people would just cuss all the time and it would
Yeah.
be a free for all. So it's learning how to balance that, showing up as you are in
Mhm.
your authentic self, and teaching others how to function within those parameters that we have to be able to do to run a business. But
Yeah.
for me, the people always come first, which I think is also why we aligned. It's managing through people that's so important, and the rest will come.
Yeah. There was a definition that I found that had really resonated deeply with me with respect to authentic leadership. And what it said was that it was leading in a way that is genuine rather than performative.
Yes.
And, again, that really hit hard because what it suggests is that with that style of leadership, and you mentioned psychological safety, so
Yeah.
it will often yield higher trust and credibility amongst not only direct reports, but peers. And again, it's because I think people are understanding what they're getting at face value
Mhm.
versus how do I approach them? How do I read them? Are they going to flip the script on me? Right. So there's that distrust versus if you're authentic and genuine, people get a more solid read on you. And so you become less scary in a way. But then also stronger team engagement, improved psychological safety, and ultimately more sustainable performance. Because I think, and you and I have experienced this before, if your house isn't in order, and that
Mhm.
can even be emotionally, like
Yep.
in our example, let's say in a veterinary practice where there is a lot of misbehavior, there's not psychological safety, there's a lack of trust. When that is happening, it's like a bad reality TV show where people are so focused on the interpersonal that they can't even focus on the job, the reason why they're there. And so that's where
Yes.
leadership style comes in of taking the reins in the spirit of the fire horse, getting them all focused on the same path of, no, this is actually how we behave together.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I feel like so few people can actually execute it well. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the simplest way I can respond to that is it's just like it feels like that's so authentic and what should happen, but yet when we go into practices, especially if they're struggling, that is always the dynamic that's missing or lacking is they're not doing that. And it's just like, how? Why? It's not that hard.
Ask you this because of course, I was thinking about this topic today before
Yeah.
you and I connected. And I was thinking back along my own leadership journey.
Yeah.
At some point, somebody made me a manager, right? I wasn't born a
Don't
manager.
you feel like one day they were just like, and you're it?
Let me tell you really quickly the story, and then I want to hear yours because I
Okay.
know you
Good.
know when that
I'm
happened.
I want to
I
know.
I was a technician
Okay.
and I was responsible because I showed up to work
Oh,
every shift
okay.
I was scheduled. And I mean, I will say, I've always been a hard worker.
Yeah.
So, not shy of hard work, good team,
Morale.
morale, what have you. And then,
Funny. And you're funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes not even intentionally, but it's just, you got to just lean into it and laugh. You can't be so serious. So, I was a tech and it was a private practice actually way back in the day. And
Okay.
the owner came to me because the manager at the time was going out on maternity leave. And I want to say, if I remember correctly, I was like literally recovering a dog from surgery. And he was like, "You're the manager now." And I remember I was like, are you sure
Mhm.
that's a good idea? I don't I don't know that I know how to do that. And so what I found, you and I can talk about being authentic today with ease,
Yes.
but you also have to recognize our length of time, not only in the industry, but in leadership roles. I can't help, and I'll say for myself, I wasn't an authentic leader that day when he promoted me to a manager because I was the person that showed up and was the most reliable. And it took years of me, I would even go so far as to say sometimes failing as a leader to learn. But I think the difference is I had the desire to do better. And
Yes.
as I evolved and grew up, I realized in those roles, it's actually a responsibility. It's not just, oh, yay, I get a couple dollars more, I get a nice title, and I feel important. It's that if you are a good leader, you actually care about the team that you need to manage. What about
Yeah.
you? When in your career did that happen that you actually became a manager or, a leader?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It was a similar journey to yours, except it was an emergency.
Mhm.
I had been working overnights for a period of time at my one of my previous employers, and emergency always feels like the redheaded stepchildren, all of those other pieces. So when they made the decision they were restructuring the leadership potential at this clinic,
Mhm.
and they went from having these managers that worked 7 to 3, which, if emergency is not busy from 7 to 3, and it is like when you're staffed the least. So like
Well,
the overlap is not there. But they were going to layer in clinical managers who had more understanding of the departments they were managing and also would be more accessible in those off hours. And I really sat there and was like, I have a decision to make. Either I leave this to chance and I let somebody else apply, and then it could be worse, right? So I know what I'm dealing with now.
yeah.
I could get better or worse depending upon who takes it. Or I was like, I think I was too naive to know better back then. It was like 2010. I had just had my son. I was probably delirious. So I was like, I don't know. Well, I'll give it a whirl. I don't want to report to somebody else. Like, that sounds
Yeah,
scary to me, right?
sure.
So I went down the path of applying. And then for whatever reason, well, this is funny. They initially moved forward. They were going to have 3 managers. And we all know that there are not 3 best friends for a reason. Like, it's a very unique there's a very unique set of people that can have 3 best friends, but there were 3 of us, and to say it failed within the first 7 months is an understatement, because it was like mom, dad, and the aunt, right? No one was ever giving a consistent answer,
Yeah,
and then ultimately, I was the last one standing. The other 2 were like, "I don't wanna do this," and so, again, naive me was like, "I'll do it," but was I an authentic leader in the beginning? Absolutely not. Was I a good leader in the beginning? No, Bridget, I
yeah,
was I
yeah.
made so many mistakes in the
Yep.
beginning. It was awful. I learned, to your point, I always wanted to do better, and as I have this innate desire to please people and to succeed, and so that was always the driver for me. Like, I can't if I disappoint anyone, it is, like, the worst thing that could happen to me,
Yeah.
like melted ice cream.
Yeah. No, I know. I hear you. I hear you. Let me ask you this. Along your journey,
Mm,
you felt at any point pressure to lead in a way that didn't feel natural to you? And if so, how did you navigate that? And you kind of touched on it too, of like with like the clothing, right? Like, okay,
mhm.
noted, can't be in pajama pants
Sure.
24/7, but scrubs
Yeah,
are pretty close. So, like, that's the workaround
that's a
there,
win.
at
That's
least
a
in the
win.
hospital setting. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, maybe it was the message or
Yeah.
the goal, what had to be accomplished. How did you deal with that without losing yourself or feeling like you weren't being authentic to also who you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had it a couple times in different roles that I've had. I think the
Mhm.
first time I experienced it is when the first company I worked for became a consolidator and started going down the path of like really embracing the corporate, I don't know, genre, I don't know, being corporate, I guess, in a way that while in the hospitals, they're telling us to not come across as corporate. But I can remember having like 2-hour meetings about like language and verbiage and how we were gonna describe something or what we were gonna title something, which at the time to me just felt so like, first of all, waste of time. And second of all, like, you're asking me to tell these people, to wrap it up in the statement could be anything. Gap analysis is an example I remember of one of the things that we used, like the phrase, instead of just
Mhm.
being like, we just need to see where opportunities are in the hospital. But no, we call it a gap analysis. And it's like,
Right.
well, we spent like 2 hours figuring that out, and it just didn't feel authentic to me, and when you're really getting into the clinic level, they don't know what a gap analysis is. So
Mhm.
again, it's like, you want me to use this language that's not gonna translate when I get into the space I'm going into. So I
Mhm.
think that was one of the first things, and I think that's where I learned that you have to be able to part of it is being a chameleon. I think that's probably when I learned that leadership does involve being a chameleon, and also, I think one of the biggest lessons is meeting people where they're at, and so that's really where you learn the manage up, manage down game, right? So, like, how you manage those you report to or your peers is very different while still authentic, it is very different than how you interface or manage those that report to you. It's what version of your authentic self has to show up to present those things in meetings, right? Like, I know I historically had been someone who didn't like to give difficult information, so I would sugarcoat. I wasn't very meat and potatoes. I would spend a lot of time, like, fluffing up what I was trying to say,
Yeah.
and that makes you more unclear, and I
Yeah.
learned that in those types of meetings or in that corporate setting, you have to be very clear. Like, I needed to come with what my thoughts were, the facts surrounding the why, and really get rid of the fluff. And so when I learned that I could still do that and not lose myself, it got a lot easier. But I think that was probably the first lesson. I think the second one was a little bit bigger in that I worked for an organization that asked me to make some decisions that I didn't necessarily feel were ethically okay. And I think those are, I think, are the harder ones. You're going as a representation of the enterprise you work for, and I'm being tasked with making decisions to exit people or have difficult conversations in the realm of wanting to do that. And I think that's where it gets trickier because I have to show up as my authentic self and have those conversations with those employees with the relationship that I've built, knowing that the outcome isn't going to be good. So I feel like
Mhm.
I almost, have to show up in a way that feels icky because I'm delivering a message that I don't have 100% buy-in in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honestly, that's where you have to make a decision about, is this the organization for me or not anymore? And
Right.
I did start that journey in one of those because I was like, this ain't it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in all fairness, I think with any employee, so not even
Mhm.
leader, I think that it's fair that as you grow and evolve as an
Yeah.
individual, there will be scenarios where you outgrow either the local hospital you work in, and that doesn't have to be bad, or
No.
the company. Like in our case, maybe it is a consolidator, a larger
Yeah.
organization that you're a part of, and again, it doesn't have to be a nasty breakup. There doesn't
No.
even have to be a negative reason per se, but rather the acknowledgement of, you know what, it was great for however many years, and I'm kind of different now, you're kind of different now, and there's that fork in the road, and we want different things, and that is okay because there's always good, bad, and ugly with those experiences. And I think you and I can attest to that with any of the companies we've been a part of. There's
Yeah.
great things and there are shitty things and
Yes.
everything in between, and that is okay. I do have to say, I don't know if my face changed, but when you said corporate, I cringed. It was so worthy
Right.
to hear the C word so freely. I didn't realize we were going to say the C word here, but
Yeah. Alright.
I'm glad you did, actually, because I think you raise a good point of, and I think, a lot of times it's people in operations that are going to experience this because it's almost like we're a double agent. We
Yes.
are a representative of the larger organization who is typically a corporation. And not all corporations are bad. There are great things that corporations bring to the table and bring to the local hospital. I think you and I can agree that pretty much everyone, at least in vet med, knows there is an underlying negative sentiment toward
Yes.
corporations. But I do think sometimes it's real where people have had a very bad experience, and that's unfortunate. But then they create that umbrella statement of,
Yeah.
all corporations, all consolidators are evil. And that's not necessarily the case. But in the same token, I think it's sometimes an excuse. And I
I
think
agree.
you and I have had this convo where, even in working with a local team and they maybe said to me, well, that feels corporate, and I'll push back and say, well, what is define corporate?
Mhm.
Accountability is not corporate. That's accountability. People don't like that, especially when they're being bad.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I think it's our job to have those combos where we push what is being said, especially when these phrases are being thrown out there. And also, as a leader, I think it's important, for maybe like a more novice leader that's still navigating their own path and being faced with the scenario you've described where maybe you don't have 100% buy-in, but it is your role. You've been outvoted. You have to agree to disagree and you have to move forward with whatever this objective is. You as a leader have to own it. It is unfair to blame others for those words and actions that will follow suit, meaning all too often when we're told
Yeah.
corporate made me do this. And then in a lot of instances, the most ironic part of it is like, corporate never said that. We never had that convo, but you're using corporate as a scapegoat. And again, good, bad, and ugly. I think as a leader, it is our obligation to own these decisions. And quite honestly, if you can't and you feel the need for a scapegoat, I think you have to look in the mirror and say, am I fit to be a leader? Because sometimes we talk about right person, wrong seat. You're not a
Yeah.
leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I wanna touch on a couple things. So,
Yeah.
I align with you on, like, when the journey is done, I agree. In the instance where, there were conversations that had to be had, it was the fork in the road for me to make a decision to leave a previous employer where I was just like, this just isn't it
Yeah.
anymore. There were already so many things going on in a state of frenzy. And I was like, this doesn't feel good. Right. And
Mhm.
so luckily I had an opportunity to, not be there anymore. And so I didn't. But
Sure.
to speak more on that, it's the season, there are seasons to life. And sometimes as humans, we don't want to acknowledge that. We feel like things should be forever. When you're growing up, you're like, you have friends, your a high school friend should be your friends for life. And that's just not realistic. And it's the same for jobs and other things. I think we have a fear of leaving them or
Mhm.
acknowledging that the season is done. But it can be beautiful. A season can teach you a lot of things. It
Yeah.
can make you a better person. It can be what you needed in that moment when you needed it. But just like, because I'm a Midwest girly, the fall does end and winter comes in. And
Mhm.
so you have to acknowledge that. And then it's time for something else. And
Mhm.
that's okay. And that's the beauty of choice. And that's the beauty of free will. You don't have to stay in those scenarios. You don't have
Mhm.
to stay working for those consolidators or your practice or whatever you're doing in whatever role. It could just be a season. And that season can be 10 years, that season can be 2. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wanted to touch on that. And then, yes, to your point, like the C word, I didn't even realize like
Yeah.
talking about the buzzword.
It flew out of your mouth.
And it's not even like because I use that word a lot when I'm talking, because I don't,
Yeah.
especially in the work world. I think that particular scenario felt very corporate because it was my first exposure to that, and we literally would, like, spend hours talking about how we were gonna, like, dynamically change words so that they felt less corporate-y, which I was like,
Right.
"This is the most corporate thing I've ever done, is to
Yeah.
have a meeting about changing what we're gonna call something so it feels less corporate." It was a miss for me, but it's fine. But yes,
Mhm.
to your point in the consolidator, and you know what my least favorite phrase is Amanda said or corporate said,
Right.
because that's just not the case most of the time.
Right.
Really good leaders influence, they don't tell. And so it's rare that when anyone that reports to me is going to a hospital to roll something out, it's rarely a tell. Now, there's a
Yeah.
handful of things that could be enterprise wide, and that's anywhere you go or organizational wide. But for
Sure.
the most part, their decisions are theirs.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and to your point, half the time I didn't even know, and they were putting my name on it, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah. Oh, I know. I know.
I shared.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us in part one of Leading Out Loud's very first episode. The second part of this conversation with Amanda will air March 17th, so make sure you don't miss how we wrap this up. To become an authentic leader, consider these actionable steps. 1, be open and approachable. Create a safe space for your team to voice their thoughts and concerns. 2, be willing to share your own journey. Be transparent about your experiences and the lessons you've learned thus far. 3, encourage feedback. Invite your team members to provide their input and seek to understand where their thoughts and perceptions come from. And then lastly, prioritize relationships. Invest the time in getting to know your team members personally, fostering a deeper connection. I hope you found some value in this conversation today, and tune in for our next episode Tuesday, March 10th.